Legislation Committee. Today the committee will continue its examination of the budget estimates for 2022-2023 with a cross-portfolio hearing on Indigenous matters. The committee may also examine the annual reports of the departments and agencies appearing before it. Senators, departments and agencies have been provided with advice on the arrangements in place to ensure the budget estimates 2022-2023 hearings are conducted in a COVID-safe environment. This guidance is also available from the Secretariat. The committee appreciates the cooperation of all attendees in adhering to these arrangements. Under Standing Order 26, the committee must take all evidence in public session. This includes answers to questions on notice. The committee would appreciate if senators could please provide any written questions on notice to the Secretariat by Friday the 22nd of April 2022, however reminds all senators as well as departments and agencies that written questions on notice can be provided at any time until the tabling of the estimates report. The committee has fixed Friday the 20th of May 2022 as the date for the return of answers to questions taken on notice. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The Senate, by resolution in 1999, endorsed the following test of relevance of questions at estimates hearings. Any questions going to the operations or financial positions of the departments and agencies which are seeking funds in the estimates are relevant questions for the purpose of estimates hearings. I remind officers that the senators resolve that there are no areas in connection with the expenditure of public funds where any person has a discretion to withhold details or explanations from the parliament or its committees unless the parliament has expressly provided otherwise. I particularly draw the attention of witnesses to an order of the Senate of the 13th of May 2009 specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. Witnesses are specifically reminded that a statement that information of a document is confidential or consists of advice to government is not a statement that meets the requirements of the 2009 order. Instead, witnesses are required to provide some specific indication of the harm to the public interest that could result from the disclosure of the information or the document. The senators also resolve that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. An officer called to answer a question for the first time should state their full name and the capacity in which they appear, and witnesses should speak clearly and into the microphones to assist Hansard to record proceedings. I remind everyone in the hearing room to switch off your mobile phone and other devices or turn them to silent. I also remind any witnesses appearing via video conference who are not speaking to mute their microphones. Officers are requested to keep opening statements very brief or seek to incorporate longer statements into the Hansard. Finally, the committee has agreed to allow media into the hearing room. In doing so, the committee reminds the media that they must follow the directions of the committee and the Secretariat and remain within those areas clearly marked for the media. In addition, recording must not occur from behind the committee or between the committee and the witnesses, and computer screens and documents belonging to senators must not be filmed, photographed or recorded. Witnesses are reminded that they can object to being recorded at any time. The committee thanks the media in advance for maintaining a COVID-safe approach while in the hearing room. It being after 9 o'clock, I welcome Senator the Honourable Amanda Stoker, representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Ms Jodie Bruin, Chief Executive Officer of the National Indigenous Australians Agency, and via video conference, Mr Joe Morrison, Group Chief Executive Officer of the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, and other officers of the ILSC. Minister, do you wish to make an opening statement at this time?
No, thank you.
Ms Bruin, do you wish to make an opening statement at this time?
Not at this point, thanks.
Mr Morrison, do you wish to make an opening statement?
No, thank you.
Oh, good.
Okay.
It's Tim Ayres here for the benefit of those people online. Perhaps just procedurally I could indicate, I think there's the Chair and I here in Canberra, and I think Senator O'Sullivan and Senator Patterson and Senator McCarthy online. If I can just indicate on behalf of Labor senators, it is only 5 weeks, I think, since the last estimates, perhaps 6. We had pretty thorough discussion with the agency and the other witnesses last time. I know it'll be a source of great disappointment to Mr Morrison and Ms Stroud, but we don't have questions for ILSC, and in fact we don't have questions for Aboriginal Hostels Limited, the CLC, the Northern Land Council, Outback Stores, or for the Office of the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations. or for cross-portfolio Indigenous matters. The only questions that we will have will be a sequence of questions for the agency. If there's no other senators that have questions for, if there are, I'm just, I guess, trying to be helpful by saying if we don't have questions for some of the other witnesses coming up this morning, my view is we should let them get about their important work and proceed as quickly as we can to the agency. I know that Senator McCarthy has questions. So Chair, I'll leave. I'm in your hands, but my view is we ought to dismiss as many witnesses as we can because it'll be good for them and good for us.
Indeed, Senator Ayres, and thank you very much for foreshadowing the nature or the time requirement for your questions today. Given that we have the ILSC on the line, I'll do the usual thing and ask if any senators have questions for the ILSC, but if not, we may let you go.
Thank you for that courtesy and respect for the officer's time, Senator Ayres. It's appreciated.
Thanks, Mr Morrison and Mr Stroud, for all of your work and all of your previous appearances. I sense we're reaching the end of the 47th Parliament, so we might see you the other side of this election.
Thank you, Senators.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There being no questions for the ILSC, I call on Aboriginal Hostels Limited. No need to apologise.
I know.
I welcome Mr Dave Chalmers, Chief Executive Officer and other officers of Aboriginal Hostels Limited. Mr Chalmers, do you wish to make an opening statement?
No, thank you, Senator.
Do any senators have questions for Aboriginal Hostels Limited?
I think you might have heard us indicate that given the very short amount of time between now and the last estimates, we don't have questions for you. Thank you very much for all of your work.
Okay. You are dismissed. Thank you so much for coming and sitting down, Mr Chalmers.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you.
I now call on the Central Land Council, who I think we have on the line. I welcome via video conference Mr Leslie Turner, Chief Executive Officer of the Central Land Council. Mr Turner, did you wish to make an opening statement?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any questions for the Central Land Council?
No, Mr Turner, it's Senator Tim Ayres here. I think you probably heard us indicate that we don't have questions for you, and I don't think other senators do. Again, thanks for all of your work, and I'll leave you in the chair's hands.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for getting up and getting on the line, Mr Turner, but I don't think any of the senators present have questions for you, so we'll dismiss the Central Land Council and bring on the Northern Land Council.
Thank you.
I welcome via video conference Mr Samuel Bush-Blanasi, the Chairman, and Mr Joe Martin-Judd, Chief Executive Officer, and other officers of the Northern Land Council. Do we have any opening statements from the Northern Land Council? Can the Northern Land Council hear us, I wonder? Or are they on mute?
Good morning. We're just checking with our Chief Executive Officer.
Sorry, can the Northern Land Council hear the committee room?
Doesn't look like it.
Joe, can you hear us where you are?
I think we can hear you in Canberra.
This is Irfan, but I'm the Chief Financial Officer, but we are just waiting for our CEO. I think I can see him online, but I think he's having some maybe technical issues. So I will just text him and pass the message on to you, Chair, if it's okay.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Would they be in a position to know whether he has an opening statement? Because if we don't have questions, then...
Good point. It's Senator Chandler, the chair here. Do we know if Mr Martin Jard has an opening statement to make? Because if not, I might just put out the call to see if senators have questions, given how quickly we are moving through the program.
My understanding is, Chair, yes, we do have, but I'm just confirming with the CEO again because he's not with us in the office today.
That's fine. Thank you.
They could provide it in writing, give him a couple of minutes and then they could send us up. Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, Sarah Sullivan here. I don't have any questions. I think I'm understanding. I think only the Greens had questions, but doesn't seem that they're on the call.
Yes, Senator O'Sullivan, it was my understanding that it was only the Greens that had questions for the entities this morning. Ooh.
Hello, this is Joe here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr Martin Jard, we can hear you. We understand. We can hear you with a lot of feedback. No, we're all good now. Mr Martin Jard, I understand you have an opening statement to make. He's disconnected. And he's disconnected. We might just suspend while we try and get him back on the line. Give it a couple of minutes, but we might just... Now, Mr Martin Jard, did you wish to make your opening statement?
Yeah, thank you. I hope you're pleased with it after all of this.
I'm sure we will be.
Opening statement. Thank you, Chair. It's Joe Martin Jard here, Chief Executive at the Northern Land Council. The Northern Land Council has a proud history of fighting for land rights and justice for Aboriginal people. Just a few weeks ago, we celebrated with Minister Wyatt 3 ceremonies handing back Aboriginal land to traditional owners of Yurapunga, the old Elsie homestead site, and the remaining half of the iconic Kakadu National Park. This was the culmination. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, Mr Martin Jard, happy for you to keep going. Or you can table the statement if you like, because I don't think senators have any questions for the Northern Land Council.
Look, I'd just like to keep going if you don't mind, just to get it into the record. And,
of course.
Yeah, so the part I got up to, we were with Minister White a couple of weeks ago, and there were 3 land claims settled, and the big one being the Kakadu National Park. This was the culmination of decades of work by the Land Council fighting against governments, mining companies, politicians and others, and we are still fighting today. Fighting for the rights of traditional owners to choose what they want to do with their land. It has been said that the Northern Land Council is helping mining companies destroy Aboriginal land and water resources. Nothing could be further from the truth. It also has been said that the Northern Land Council refuses to hear the word no from traditional owners. This is untrue. The opposite is the case. The right to refuse consent to mining on Aboriginal land is one of the strongest protections under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. The Northern Land Council supports the decisions of traditional owners who say no to mining on Aboriginal land. We have given evidence to this effect on numerous occasions. We have appeared before various parliamentary inquiries and Senate estimates hearings in recent years. For the record, once again, the role of the NLC is to give independent expert advice and to support traditional owners to make informed decisions based on that advice. The Northern Land Council stands by its record fighting for Aboriginal peoples. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr Martin Jard. Do any senators have questions for the Northern Land Council? I think I already know the answer.
Should just indicate, Mr Martin Judd, thank you for your opening statement. It's Tim Ayres here. Just indicated earlier on behalf of Labor senators, given how short the time was since the last estimates, that we don't have questions for you and a number of the other land councils and agencies. But thank you for your opening statement and for all of your work.
Thank you, Senator Ayres.
I second those sentiments. Thank you very much to the Northern Land Council. You're dismissed.
Okay, bye-bye.
And we'll bring on Outback Stores.
Good morning, Senators and Chair.
I now welcome via video conference Mr Michael Borg, Chief Executive Officer, and other officers of Outback Stores Proprietary Limited. Mr Borg, did you wish to make an opening statement?
We have previously pushed through our opening statement in advance, so you may have that for your records.
Yes, we have received that and that will be tabled by the committee. Thank you, Mr Borg. Do any senators have questions for Outback Stores? No, I think, or suspect, Mr Borg, you might have heard Senator Ayres' sentiments to the last witness. We don't want to take up any more of your time, so thank you very much for appearing today. Unfortunately, the senators who wish to ask you questions are not present, so we will dismiss you and move on to the Office of the Registrar of Indigenous Corporations.
Thank you.
Would it be helpful if we suspended? The committee might just briefly suspend while we corral a few of our witnesses.
If it helped, we could just reorganise.
Because I believe we have Oric on the line. I welcome via video conference Mr Gerrit Wanganeen, Acting Registrar of Indigenous Corporations. Mr Wanganeen,
Thank you, Senator.
Did you wish to make an opening statement?
I'd only add just to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country in which you are meeting on, and the fact that I'm dialing in from Larrakia country, and acknowledge elders past and present, and apologise that I can't be there in person.
That is quite all right, Mr Wanganeen, because I don't think senators who are present have any questions for you. So we might thank you very much for getting on the call today and dismiss you.
Well, no worries. Apologies.
Thanks, Mr Wanganeen.
Thank you very much.
Great. And we'll now bring on the National Indigenous Australians Agency.
Thank you.
We might just suspend again to make sure that we have everyone from the NIAA here who needs to be here, so the committee will suspend. Reconvene because I think we have everyone here who we need to have here. And I welcome again Ms Bruin, Chief Executive Officer, and other officers of the National Indigenous Australians Agency. Ms Bruin, did you wish to make an opening statement or any additional comment at this time?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Go for it. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and Senators. Wandiwa. I wish to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, who are the traditional custodians of the Canberra area, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander senators and witnesses appearing today. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to make the opening statement. It is brief. The 2022-23 budget has provided the National Indigenous Australians Agency additional resources, both administered and departmental funding, to expand the scope of what we are able to deliver to improve the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. NIAA is set to receive $1.9 billion next financial year, consisting of $1.65 billion in administered funding and $325.6 million in departmental operating costs. We have also seen an increase in our staffing level, up 26.5 positions, bringing us to a total of 1,270 staff. I would like to take a few moments to quickly update the committee on some of our major accomplishments since our last appearance. On the 1st of March, we opened the Territory's Stolen Generations Redress Scheme, a significant step in the healing journey for stolen generation survivors from the Northern Territory, the Australian Capital Territory and Jervis Bay. In the first month, we received more than 200 applications, and the team is working diligently through those to deliver the first payments in the very near future. We will continue to assess claims as quickly as possible, and guided by our external advisory board, will do so in a trauma-informed and culturally sensitive manner. On 24th of March, we were also pleased to support the finalisation of 6 Aboriginal land claims across the Northern Territory, including nearly half of the Kakadu National Park. Handover ceremonies to traditional owners mark the end of a very long process, and we will continue to work with these communities as they embark on the developments and economic empowerment they wish to see in their communities. Also, since our last appearance, the government has announced the outcomes of the Indigenous Land Enterprise Infrastructure Fund and the Food Security Grant opportunity, appointed the Northern Territory Indigenous Business Network to establish an Indigenous business and employment hub in the top end, established the interim board of the Northern Territory Aboriginal Investment Corporation, and opened the architectural design competition for Noora, which is a big step towards making that project a reality. We have initiated conversations with state and territory governments and the Australian Local Government Association to secure their support for local and regional voice arrangements, which signals the start of the implementation stage. This work will be supported by the Local and Regional Voice Establishment Group, which will assist governments and focus on overarching issues relevant across all jurisdictions and regions. Community-led co-design remains at the centre of this process, and once regions are determined, local people will be supported by governments to design their own local and regional voice. And over the last couple of months, we have placed a strong focus on flood-affected Indigenous communities across the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales and in southern Queensland, providing what direct support we can and assistance to connect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with mainstream services and recovery supports. We have continued to offer our coordinating support for Indigenous portfolio bodies, including facilitating the processes to appoint a new Registrar for Indigenous Corporations, Chief Executive Officer for the Torres Strait Regional Authority, and a number of board appointments to Indigenous Business Australia, the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, Outback Stores and the new Northern Territory Aboriginal Investment Corporation. And looking internally, we launched our Reconciliation Action Plan 22 to 25, and we were proud to have our work recognised through 2 nominations in the Institute of Public Administration's Spirit of the Service Awards for the conduct of the Indigenous Voice co-design process and our continuous cultural learning and development program called Footprints. I thank the committee and welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms Bruin. Senator McCarthy, I'm going to give the call to you.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you very much, Ms Bruin, for your opening statement. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you all from Larrakia country up here. With your opening statement, can I also just put on the record, Ms Bruin, to yourself and the agencies that the handback of Aboriginal land up here last month was incredibly warmly received, and I certainly want to personally put on the record my thanks to all involved with that significant, or those significant events at Mataranka for all the mob from around Jill Mingan and Europunga and Nooka who came, and the Northern Land Council, but also at Kakadu as well. So thank you to your staff. And I know it was something important that the Minister was able to finish in this term of Parliament for the people up here. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Can I just go to the local and regional voices? I do want to go to the Voice Co-Design report first up. The budget committed $31.8 million to commence the establishment of the regional voices in the next year. Can you outline how that money will be spent?
Thank you, Senator. Julianne Guevara, Group Manager, Strategic Policy Group in NIAA. It's true, Senator, the government did announce $31.8 million for the establishment of local and regional voices. This is part, of course, of the process that was outlined in the co-design report, which was released by government on the 17th of December last year. Of course, I think we mentioned at the last hearing, a process is now underway whereby the Minister has had discussions with his state and territory counterparts. We're also having discussions at the state and territory level, at senior officials level as well. So since our last appearance before this committee, we have had, in fact, 8 rounds of consultations with both state and territory governments at a bilateral level, and also ALGA as well. In addition, we had a senior officials meeting just last week to outline details of the budget for state and territory counterparts. Essentially, if in terms of the funding, there will be funding for, as the CEO indicated, the co-design process for the development of those 35 local and regional voices. There is, of course, funding in the budget for some of the work that will go around the activities of the establishment working group as well. So things associated with the implementation toolkit. There is, of course, additional departmental funding associated with this, funding for some communications-related products as well. And of course, some of the other elements that the establishment working group will look at. So things around how we design dispute resolution panels, community capability development, and monitoring and evaluation sort of strategies. But that we won't actually get to that stage until, in fact, we've been through these consultations that we're having with, first and foremost, the state and territory governments.
All right, I might come back to some of those points you've raised there, Ms Guevara. I'll just go on to this one. The budget explicitly says this funding is to commence the establishment of the regional voices, so presumably the establishment process will take longer than 1 year. Is that the plan?
Senator, as we said at the last hearing as well, it is a stepwise sort of process. So we are at the current point in time having those early discussions with state and territory governments. As I indicated, it really is a scoping exercise at this stage, and we've had 7 of those with states and territories and 1 with ALGA. During the process of those consultations, obviously we're talking about things that were contained within the report, such as numbers of regions per state or territory, the funding arrangements, of course, because what is envisaged is that there is kind of long-term sustainable funding for backbone organisations to support local and regional voices, and it's quite clear that that would be something that we would look at co-funding arrangements with between state and territory governments. And of course the Commonwealth Government, and also things around what happens in relation to existing arrangements that states may have in place that need to align with the establishment of local and regional voices.
How are the discussions going with the states and territories?
So, as I said, we've had those initial scoping discussions with 7 so far, and I'd say overall really quite positive. We obviously have a lot of detail to get through, and in fact, once we've now going past those initial scoping studies, we are going back to states and territories. So we'll start with a second round of conversations with New South Wales Government next week, which will attempt to get into a little bit more detail on those issues that I've already indicated.
And you said the Minister had been meeting with states and territories as well. So how are those meetings going?
So the Minister had his consultations under the Indigenous Affairs Task Force meeting, which I think we also flagged at our last appearance here. That was on the 14th of February. The Minister has subsequently written to all of his state and territory counterparts just after the release of the budget to provide an indication to them of the Commonwealth's commitment of funding during this next financial year.
So the Regional Voice Establishment Group, can you list the members of that?
So, Senator, we're still in the process, obviously, of the development of that establishment working group. When the Minister wrote out to his state and territory counterparts last week advising of the budget, he also indicated at that stage that we have the 2 co-chairs of that establishment working group now, which Professor Tom Karma and Professor Marcia Langton. Of course, they were involved in the co-design efforts as well. And for the importance of obviously some continuity and understanding what was contained within the co-design report, they have been appointed as the 2 co-chairs. There is still obviously a process to go through, which was flagged with states and territories, of consultations with them on the rest of the members of that establishment working group.
Okay, so last estimate, Senator Stoker indicated that the government had committed to option 2 from the co-design report for the establishment of a national voice. Is that still the case?
So, Senator, as indicated previously, option 2 is the option. We are, though, however, at the stage of the establishment of local and regional voices. It is what's envisaged in option 2, of course, is this integrated model. We can't actually move to the establishments of a national voice until such time as we've actually gone through this quite detailed design process on local and regional voices.
Okay, so, and that will obviously be put on hold then if we go into an election at any time now, I imagine. Or will those consultations still continue?
Senator, we are still obviously having discussions with state and territory governments. We won't obviously during a process of caretaker be in a position to commit to any specifics within those conversations with state and territory governments, but consultations with them will continue throughout this period.
Tell us how the consultations with ALGA is going. I imagine that's is that the Local Government Association?
It is. That's the Local Government Association. I wasn't actually present for that. My colleague Robert Ryan was. He is joining us. I'm not sure if he's here yet, but if we could come back to you on that following subsequent questions.
Okay. So will any of the 31.8 million in this budget be used to progress the national voice?
At this stage, Senator, the focus, as I said, was really on the establishment of local and regional voices. So it really, we're not really at that stage yet where we're at, a position to consider that.
So would you? I'm just looking at the budget though, Ms. Guevara. If this is purely for the regional voices, then you wouldn't be setting anything aside of that budget for the national voice process. I just want to understand what the thinking is.
No, so it's clear that this is for the establishment of local and regional voices, the funding in this current budget.
Yep, thank you. So if we look at option 2 then, there hasn't been any allocation for funding to progress it over the next 4 years?
No, that's correct.
Okay. I guess, I mean, the co-design report was clear that there is a sense of urgency for a national voice, and that momentum on a national voice should not be stalled until all the regional voices are established. So, how do you marry up that too, I suppose, in recognising that there's been a particular focus on the national voice, and then here we have the regional and local voices?
Yeah, Senator, as I said, it is a stepwise process, and we are in that process of obviously having those very initial conversations with state and territory governments around questions of whether the numbers of regions which were proposed in the report are indeed correct. As I said, there is a discussion underway about what funding arrangements would look like for the longer term for the sustainability of local and regional voices, and so we're not kind of at that stage yet that we can start looking at sort of, subsequent steps, including the possibility of national voice, until we've got the establishment of those local and regional voices secured. My colleague Robert Ryan has joined us, Senator, and was present for the ALGA bilateral conversations, and may be able to just give you a bit of a sense of what were the issues and how were those issues progressed at the initial conversation.
Robert Ryan, Branch Manager, Recognition and Empowerment Branch. So we had a meeting with the Australian Local Government Association. We have met with them throughout this co-design process as well. It was identified really strongly through the co-design process and the consultation that local government is an absolute key player in local and regional voices. ALGA discussion was fairly fruitful. The approach we're taking, it's a bit more complicated with local government. There's over 500 councils, as you know, across the country. So what we're doing initially is working with ALGA really around making sure we get the approach right around local government, that we're sort of communicating effectively, firstly with those state bodies and then with those individual councils. So we're beginning with the Australian Local Government Association to get those settings right, making sure there's good communication with all the local government members, and that we're connecting local government into those discussions that we're going to have also with the states and territory governments as well. There's good commitment from ALGA to support the process, as there has been throughout, and they're keen to sort of work with their state bodies to make that happen. But the big issue is going to be how we actually then connect each of those 500 plus councils as we move through this process into a local and regional voice at the end. But at this stage, they're on board, in principle, supporting the commitment to local government around local and regional voices. Some resourcing implications for local government as well that we need to discuss. So following this scoping exercise or this scoping discussion, we'll have a sit down with them where we actually unpack these issues, including what resourcing we might need to look at to support local government through the process.
And do you speak with them about a national voice in those meetings with ALGA?
No, the discussion was only on that next step of a local and regional voice establishment.
So it's not raised at all in terms of priority as well for the government?
No, it wasn't raised by
ALGA. Okay, I will certainly follow up on the local government side of things, but I'm conscious that there are representatives to ask questions. I guess if I can just go back to you, Ms Guevara, just to confirm. So you're committed to establishing a national voice, but you appear to have no real plans to progress it, and you've committed no funding to it for the next 4 years.
Just to perhaps clarify, Senator, I think at the last hearing, the Minister had indicated that the government is committed to option 2, but in fact what the government has most immediately committed to is the establishment of local and regional voices. That is certainly what Minister Wyatt had indicated at the time of the release of the report. And indeed, the funding that was committed at the budget was in fact for the co-design process for local and regional voices. So it is a stepwise approach that is envisaged at this stage.
Yes, but I still come back to the original question that the focus is not on the national voice, the focus is on the local and regional voices, so there's no ongoing funding in regards to a national voice.
So conversations with states and territories at the moment are focused on the design of the local and regional voices, and the funding for that first step is reflected in the budget.
Thanks, Ms Gouveia. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator McCarthy. I understand Senator Thorpe is on the line and has a few questions.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks NIAA for coming in today. My first question is, how much money is in the Indigenous Advancement Strategy? Sorry.
Thank you for the question.
Can people hear me?
Yep, thank you. Thank you for the question. Just finding all my papers.
Nicholas Cray, Chief Financial Officer, NIAA. Senator, for the 5 years from 21-22 through to 25-26, there's $8,188 million in the IAS.
Thank you. So there's no shortage of black money there. Can you provide me on notice every expenditure that has come out of the IAS the last 2 financial years, broken down for when a First Nations owned and led organisation has received the funding and when non-Indigenous organisations have received funding?
We can do that, Senator.
Excellent, thank you. I note that you're drawing down $1.9 million from the IAS to fund custody notification services in Western Australia and the Northern Territory, but only for 1 year. I know for a fact the organisations running CNS in the NT and WA have been asking for a lot more support. You've got plenty of money. Why are you not making custody notification services fully funded and ongoing?
Thank you, Senator. Ben Burden, Acting Deputy Chief Executive Officer. The provision in the budget of $1.9 million to extend the custody notification system in both NT and WA is an extension of the original agreement to put in place the system for 3 years, and that agreement was on the proviso that after 3 years that funding arrangements for the scheme would transfer to state authorities, and so this extension, one-off extension here for WA and NT will allow us to conduct an evaluation of the scheme and facilitate that transition to NT and WA funding. And that was within the original parameters of the agreement and consistent with that.
Thank you. So that won't impact on the ground services in the meantime, will it? Is there a process where these services are guaranteed to continue whilst you're negotiating with the state?
Yes.
Thank you. $20.2 million was spent to purchase the right to the Aboriginal flag. It came out of the Indigenous Advancement Strategy money. Is that correct?
Senator, no, that's... Senator, I can advise that that money wasn't drawn from the Indigenous Advancement Strategy.
Can you tell me where it came from there?
I might just ask the CFO to... Oh, sorry, he's there. to explain the technicalities for us, if I may. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Senator, the government provided funding in the budget for the $20.2 million for the free use of the Aboriginal flag. The timing of the payments, i.e. the negotiation of the settlement of claims with all parties, was paid in the 21-22 financial year. But because the timing of those payments was not finalised before the completion of the additional estimates bills, that funding from the government, which has been provided in this budget, is going to be appropriated in the 22-23 financial year.
Okay, I'm not an accountant, but what you're basically saying, you can confirm that the $20.2 million did not come out of Indigenous Advancement Strategy money.
There was additional funding provided, which will be paid out of the Indigenous Advancement Strategy, because that's how we, the NIAA makes administered payments on behalf of government. But there was no requirement for the IAS to absorb that cost. The government provided that through this budget.
Okay, but the IAS did contribute to purchasing the Aboriginal flag.
Sorry, Senator, could you repeat that question? I couldn't quite hear you.
So, did the IAS contribute any money to buy the Aboriginal flag?
So, Senator, yes, the IAS was the funding mechanism for the payments made for the flag. Additional money was made available by government to the IAS to make those payments.
How much?
Or $20.2 million.
So the 20.2 came from the government to the IAS, and the IAS paid for the flag from the money from the government. Is that right?
Correct.
I just like plain language, because there's a lot of people listening, and I think the answers have been quite complicated. So
perhaps, Senator,
if I...
Sorry, apologies.
Can you guarantee that $20.2 million did not come out of, it did not affect the Indigenous Advancement Strategy money at all? It was just an administrative transfer, is that correct?
I can... so the payment for the flag did not impact on the quantity, the amount of money available under the IAS for the provision of programs and services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The amount of money paid through the IAS for the flag arrangements was supplemental or additional money to the IAS, and the amount of money available through the IAS for the provision of programs and services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Okay, so the IAS got more money, $20.2 million, from another bucket of money out of the government to pay for the flag.
Correct.
Right. What other bucket did it come from, sorry?
Senator, that's the that's the normal provision of the government providing funding through new policy proposals.
Okay. Well, that's pretty handy for other times we need extra dough into the Aboriginal people in this country. So thank you for that. Can you tell me how much WAM got from Indigenous Advancement Strategy?
Senator, out of the $5.2 million was paid to WAM Clothing to terminate its licence agreement.
But as we've established, it didn't come from the Indigenous Advancement Strategy funds. It came from the additional appropriation that was provided for this purpose.
Yep, thank you, Minister, for that. Okay, so just the other week I met with representatives from the Central Australian Youth Link-Up Service, CALIS, and the McDonald, Barkly and Central Desert Regional Councils. And they're struggling to get money for youth services from the Indigenous Advancement Strategy. They applied and since money that they received is not indexed, they're struggling, and they've asked me to ask you the questions as to why they are not receiving support. Since 2015, they've taken an effective funding cut of more than $8 million. So they need more funding for reliable and safe programs, youth workers, even things like toilets and hand washing facilities and basic food prep facilities. And they keep getting knocked back. So what's going on?
Senator, my recollection is that after the last estimates round, there were some questions on notice that we provided regarding indexation of the IAS. I'd probably refer about the overall funding availability in the IAS to that answer. But I guess that overall the way that programs are structured, it's part of the program to proceed those questions.
And I guess, Senator, to go to the specific question in relation to the providers that you've mentioned, is that the way that we administer the grants program is that certain amounts are made available to providers, and then if there is a need for further funding from the provider to deliver services, then requests are made of us, and if there is money available, then across the breadth of the program, then we can certainly look at making further funding available. But the money, the IAS is a there are funding parameters around and funding limitations.
I understand that, and I won't have much more time to ask you questions if I get a bureaucratic response like that. So
more than happy to take the
I just want to go back to my initial question. We're talking about youth services, and if we look at the Northern Territory, do you think that they need support around youth services in places like the Northern Territory?
Senator, you're asking me for my opinion.
Does the NIAA consider that there is a crisis with our young people in this country? For young Aboriginal people, given the incarceration rate of our babies, do you think that the services that are there to support them, do you think that they should be supported adequately?
So, yes, Senator.
Or are they being supported adequately?
Senator, certainly I can advise you that we have had a particular focus in the agency over the last 3 months relating to youth issues and provision of services to youth across the country, and specifically in Alice Springs and also the Kimberley and also in northern Queensland. I could ask my colleague to take you through what we're doing in Alice Springs, if that would be helpful for you.
If I could have that on notice, if that information can be provided. But I sat with youth workers from these communities who told me and Senator Cox that there are no hand washing facilities in the middle of a pandemic in a lot of these communities where they're doing youth programs. We're talking about programs that effectively have been cut of funding $8 million since 2015. So I'd like you, please, the NIAA, given at the start of this questioning, you told me you've got $8 billion and that throughout this inquiry, questioning, you also told me you can get some money off the government to pay for a flag. Now, I want you to tell these youth workers who come to me begging for support for the young people in their communities, you tell them why you won't fund them.
So, Senator, what I can say is that we are working very closely with NT authorities. There is obviously, for the NIAA, we are a Commonwealth agency, and our role and responsibility, and particularly also in relation to funding, is to the issues that the Commonwealth actually works on. I mean, what I can say is in the broad, over the 21-22 financial year, the NIAA has invested over $300 million in safety and wellbeing programs. They include the Indigenous Youth Connection to Culture program, social and emotional wellbeing services,
Thank you.
and
That's great.
youth and engagement programs.
Thank you. Just given the time, and I know there's more questions, simply, will you reinstate the funding of youth services from the IAS to levels before the IAS was introduced? It's a simple yes or no.
So,
the youth workers are listening to this and the community. So, can you reinstate the funding to support our young people through these services the way they used to be supported? Yes or no? Not a bureaucratic response, just yes or no.
Well, respectfully, sometimes simply yes or no doesn't provide an accurate and helpful answer. So if Mr Burden requires more than a one-word answer, he's well and truly entitled to give it.
Thanks, Minister.
Senator, the questions, the issue of the money made available to the agency through the Indigenous Advancement Strategy and through the budget are a question for government. I mean, the decision on indexation was made some financial years ago, and we are now in a situation where we're here at the moment, as Mr Cray has outlined, with the position of the IAS now, and the question of whether indexation and how it relates to specific grant monies made available to specific providers. Really, it's a question of if a provider needs additional funding to deliver the services that they need to deliver, then that should be a conversation between the provider and the NIAA officials on the ground, to ensuring that we, as the NIAA, and that relevant state and territory jurisdictions are making appropriate levels of funding available to deliver services necessary.
Right. That's great, and that's a good process. However, the NIAA don't respond to these people on the ground. They've applied for funding, they've gone through the process. So will the NIAA at the very least, consider upgrading of essential youth infrastructure in remote communities so our young people can have toilets, hand washing facilities and food prep facilities, and even a covered outdoor facility? Is that at all possible? Because they've asked and they've not got a response, so can you please tell Aboriginal Australia, Indigenous Australia, if you can help our young people out in remote communities to have basic human rights and facilities?
Senator, it's Jodie Bruin. Ben Burden's been trying to answer that question. It isn't simple yes and no, and it is based on application processes, but it's also, I suppose, the complexity of working with states and territories around their contribution as well, and often that infrastructure is funded by a state and territory. But I'm happy to look at the exact detail if you send those through and do it as a question on notice, and have a look at the particular case. But as Mr Burden was saying, the NIAA does spend over 300 million, or 300 million is being invested through a range of activities supporting the wellbeing and positive behaviour for youth, including the Indigenous Youth Connection to Culture program, social and emotional wellbeing, youth engagement programs. So there's a whole range of other programs that come out of those funds.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to take that on notice as well in terms of the specifics.
I'd appreciate that, and I would even love to help you meet with these youth workers so that you could hear from them themselves, and we can sort this out quickly.
Happy
So
to do
thank
that,
you for that.
Senator.
No further questions from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Senator McCarthy, I believe you have a couple of further questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go to the Remote Engagement Program and CDP class action.
Sorry, Senator McCarthy, we just couldn't understand you there. Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The Remote Engagement Program and CDP class action.
Thank you. We'll just get the right officers to the table.
Good morning, Senator. Deborah Fulton, Acting Group Manager for Economic Policy and Programs.
Good morning, Ms Fulton. The budget papers say the cost of the measure, of this particular measure, will be partially met from within the existing resources of the IAS strategy. How much of the $11.5 million is money?
Senator, I might have the CEO run you through the tables, and then if you have questions around how that's used, I could go to that.
CFO, sorry, Deb.
Sorry, what did I call you? I do what I can.
Sorry, Senator. So were you referring to the Remote Engagement Program extension measure?
Yes, on page 164 of budget paper 2.
Yep.
The government's providing $11.5 million over 5 years for two things. And I'm just trying to understand how it breaks down for, how you break the 11.5 down for remote engagement pilot sites, and also in responding to the class action.
So, Senator, the funding breakdown is fairly complex in this measure. For this measure, there's a reduction in the out years of administered expenditure which is a reduction in the cost of funding in the IAS of the $1.1 million. That's the negative $900,000 in 23-24 and the negative $200,000 in 24-25. Our partners in Services Australia and Department of Social Services also have received either a mix of funding, and so the impact on Social Services Australia is outlined in the budget paper in the financial implications table, and there's additional funding for Department of Social Services as a result of this measure.
Okay, so just tell me though, sorry, can I just have your name again?
Sorry,
please?
it's Nicholas Gray, Chief Financial Officer.
Gray, okay, Mr. Gray. Could you just tell me though, of the 11.5, how much will be spent on the 5 pilot sites?
Sorry, Senator, that's referring back to the Dawson settlement case, of which there's $4.4 million for NIAA departmental expenditure, $2.3 million for NIAA administered expenditure, and then $0.3 million for Department of Social Services. I'll ask Ms Fulton to talk to the particulars of the trial sites.
So, Senator, we're anticipating with the trial sites that the implementation of those pilots can be absorbed within the CDP funding. So there's additional funding for the agency on departmental for the work around supporting and bringing together the trial sites, but the actual implementation of the trials once they're underway is absorbed within the allocation for CDP.
All right, sorry, I'm just trying to understand this. So Mr Craig gave me the 4.4 million, 2.3 million and 0.3 million for the court case, but I just want to understand how the breakdown for each of the 5 pilot sites. How much is going through each of the 5 pilot sites?
So, Senator, the cost breakdown that Mr Craig gave you around administered, which is for running all of the trial sites, it's not, sorry, for departmental around all of the trial sites, it's not broken down rigidly by site.
That's the 2.3 million?
Pardon?
Okay, so that's the 2.3 million.
No, the 2.3 million is the administered component, and that relates to the Dawson settlement.
Okay, and then the 4.4 million is assisting with the 5 pilot sites?
That's related to the departmental administration for all of the sites.
Okay, but you can't break down from that 4.4 million at each site?
No,
so
that's
how
correct.
much would the Midwest region WA get? How much would the Nukunjata lands get? Air South Australia, Barkly South and North and Palm Island?
So that funding is actually retained within NIAA for departmental contributions for the work in facilitating the development of the trials. That funding isn't going specifically to the regions in payments to the regions, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So can I just clarify something? We were talking in another estimates committee about the Barkly deal. And in the Barkly deal, they have 28 areas that they want to achieve on their implementation plan. And I put to them the question around point 12, which is improvements to the delivery of the community development program, and they referred to the remote engagement program, but they couldn't tell me any more on that. Is your remote engagement program a part of the Barkly Regional Deal?
Senator, it's separate to the Barkly Regional Deal. So in determining it as a trial site, they will, once they've designed their approach, implement a trial, but it's separate to the Barkly Regional Deal.
So why would the government be saying that CDP program is part of the remote engagement program of the Barkly Regional Deal?
So job seekers that are on the CDP caseload could well be placed in roles that are in jobs that are created as part of the Barkly Regional Deal and undertake, work placements with them. But it's so any person on the CDP caseload that is looking for work would be supported into roles, and there may be roles created through the Barkly Regional Deal that CDP job seekers are placed in.
But is anyone from NIAA involved in the Barkly Regional Deal as part of the government process?
So our regional colleagues are engaged in that.
Sorry, we'll just get another member of the staff to the table. Thank you.
Senator McCarthy, Sam Jeffries, Acting Deputy Chief Executive Officer. Yes, our staff in the Tennant Creek office are involved in the Barkly trial site conversations.
Okay, so thanks, Mr. Jeffries. So you're talking about the Barkly trial site for the remote engagement program. Is that the same thing as being involved in the Barkly Regional Deal implementation plan?
I think they're two separate arrangements, Senator. We do play a role in part of the governance table of the Barkly Regional Deal and its implementation. which is led by infrastructure.
Okay, so that's the governance. Thank you for that, Mr Jeffries. It might have been a bit of a stretching of the situation there. Thank you. I'll just go on. In terms of the jobs created under the remote engagement program, can you tell me how many jobs, and this is not just to you, Mr Jeffries, it's to the table, but can you tell me how many jobs have been created under the remote engagement program across the board?
So to date, Senator, the 5 trial sites are still working through their local co-design around how they want the trial to work in each of those sites. So they've all but one have had their initial meetings to start discussing how they want the trial to work, but the trials are not yet actually operational.
And is that because there's still ongoing discussion?
Through the co-design process, yes. So the local co-design groups formed, met, the majority of them met over the last month. Palm Island in Queensland is yet to have its first meeting. So we expect that the co-design period will take some months as they work through how they want the trial to work in that region, and then it will be implemented.
And who's in the co-design process for the Barkly?
So I can provide to you on notice the individuals, but we do have a range of groups that are involved, if you'd like me to read those out.
Sure.
Sure. So we have the Department of Education with the Northern Territory Government, Barkly Regional Council, Jula Likari Council Aboriginal Corporation, and my apologies for pronunciation there and on this next one as well. Anyanjinji Health, I think. Outback Stores. Beg your pardon, Senator. Outback Stores.
No, you're right. Yep.
The Papulu Apakari Aboriginal Corporation, Group Training Northern Territory, Alpui Art and Culture Centre, Barkly Regional Deal Backbone, Centre Farm, T&J Constructions, Many Rivers, Pata Aboriginal Corporation and RN Employment. And now that those groups have had their first meeting, we do anticipate there could be a little bit of fluidity around additional groups coming in as the work. They will now determine the ongoing membership of the group.
And what's happening to the CDP program across the board at the moment while these 5 trials are still being discussed?
So the CDP program continues across remote Australia. It'll be continuing in parallel while those trial sites are underway, and it will just be in those trial sites that in the first instance we will implement something different.
And providers are still having participants on CDP at the moment?
Yes, so the CDP caseload is a little over 42,000 at the moment, and the CDP providers are continuing to provide services to them.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
McCarthy. If no other senators have questions for the NIAA.
Excuse me, Chair. I thought there was another senator who did, because I've certainly got more questions for NIAA.
Oh, sorry, Senator McCarthy. I might give you the call back.
So I'm happy to get through them if...
Yeah, yes. I think I'll give the call back to you, Senator McCarthy. No worries. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to go to heritage funding, if I could, with officers.
Heritage funding? Once we get there.
So we've got the officers at the table?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Okay. Great. Thank you. When will the federal government respond to the report of the Juukan Gorge inquiry?
Senator McCarthy, Andrea Kelly, Acting Group Manager, Social Policy and Programs. If I understood you, you were asking about the government report into Juukan Gorge?
Yeah, just the government response to the report, Ms Kelly.
Thank you, Senator. I understand it's with Minister Lee, so that's probably a question for Minister Lee.
No worries, thank you. Has new heritage legislation been drafted?
Senator McCarthy, Ben Burden, Acting Deputy Chief Executive Officer. The questions around the legislation are really best directed to the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment as the responsible agency for that legislation. I don't want to be unhelpful, but we're really commenting on, you're asking us to comment on legislation that's the responsibility of another agency.
But I understand you are the agency responsible for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs. Do you not have any say in any of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage?
Yes, we do, and we are we have a very close working relationship with that department, and as you know, the Minister is co-chairing the roundtable with his colleague Minister Lee, and we do participate on the working group. That said, we are not the lead agency for the piece of legislation that you're referring to.
I'm going to go through these questions, and I do hope you are able to find some way to give information to First Nations people about your agency being involved with the care and protection of heritage. What machinery of government have there been to move protection of First Nations heritage from the environment to the National Indigenous Australians Agency?
Senator McCarthy, since the establishment of the NIAA, there hasn't been any changes.
So we're...
Budget says 37 point... The budget says 37.5... Sorry, are you trying to say something there?
No, I keep interrupting you inadvertently. My apologies.
Okay. I know it's a bit tricky with all this technology, but I must say I do appreciate being able to do it from home on our country up this way. The budget says 37.5 million will go towards strengthening the governance of prescribed bodies corporate.
Yes, can we, Senator, let me just bring the relevant officials to the table for you.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Senator. We're ready to go now.
Okay. Will that be evenly distributed among or across all the PBCs?
Rachel Carrigan, Branch Manager. Oh, sorry, Senator. Rachel Carrigan, Branch Manager, Land. So that funding is split across a range of activities, and there will be the possibility for PBCs and also through the native title rep bodies and service providers to apply for funding for some of those measures. Other funding will increase training, which will be delivered through the National Native Title Council.
So has a PBC steering group been established?
The funding also includes the establishment of a PBC steering group, yes, Senator.
And how much is going to that?
There was 2.5 million for that, Senator.
So has the group reported?
That group is yet to be established, Senator.
Okay, so when would their first report be due?
There'll now be a process to establish that group, and I do just need to correct, sorry, it's 2.6 million over 5 years for the establishment of that group. That will now occur over the next second half of this, through to the second half of this year.
Okay, thank you. And this is just a general question. What work has gone into calculating the ramifications of the High Court's Timber Creek native title compensation case, if any?
Senator,
that's across the table there to whoever can answer that one.
So, Senator, and towards the end of last year, the native title ministers meeting met from around the jurisdictions, and following that, they released guiding principles around compensation, and that continues then to guide jurisdictions in their engagement.
All right, thank you. I'd like to go to remote enrolment. I can get officers.
Senator McCarthy, is this your last topic? I'm just trying to time manage how we get on to the next witness.
I've actually got 2 more topics. This is remote enrolment, and then I'd like to finish with the McDonald versus Commonwealth class action.
Okay.
So I've probably got, yeah, it won't take long, Chair, and then
very good.
Senator McCarthy.
NIAA go.
Senator McCarthy, I'm Ben Burden, Deputy Chief Executive Officer. Can I, Mark, clarify, you mentioned remote enrolment. Do you mean education enrolment or electoral enrolment?
Well, we're coming up to a federal election, so I just want to ask a few questions about the enrolment of First Nations people.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Well, the official is just coming in from the waiting room. Thank you.
Okay.
While we're breaking for witnesses to get to the table, is it the intention to take the morning tea break as scheduled, or to do it at some other point?
Good question, Minister.
10 to 11 was the scheduled time.
It was indeed. I think given Senator McCarthy says she's almost done with the NIAA, we might just move through NIAA and then take a 10-minute break to get our health officials up here for the next section.
That's if, I mean, I would propose that we, I'm not sure whether any senators do have questions for health or whether we'd prefer to just, if there's only a short set of questions for health, like, let's...
Put them on notice, is that what you're...
Well, either that or
Senator
not take the break and then conclude. It'd be pretty, be more efficient, I think.
Okay.
Can be orchestrated. Oh, healthy here, great. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Senator McCarthy, go right ahead, and we might try and push through.
All right, thank you. Since we last met, not so long ago, are you able to update the committee on any work the agency has undertaken with the Australian Electoral Commission on enrolment in remote communities?
Yes, Senator. So, of course, these are matters that fall squarely within the responsibility of the AEC. So our role is really to provide support as required by the AEC. So that's often providing advice about contacts that they can reach out to in part of their outreach program to increase those enrolment numbers. We have provided a staff member on secondment to assist with that. So it's very much a supporting role because this is an area where the AEC leads and we provide support as required.
Where's the staff member being provided to? What jurisdiction?
I think it's the Northern Territory, Senator. But I'd have to clarify that.
And in terms of the advice that you provide, what have you been asked in relation to needing to give any advice?
It's mainly around stakeholders that they could actually reach out to in order to get better reach into communities, into Indigenous populations. That's the major one, I'd say, but other issues as they arise.
And just generally speaking around the fact that there is such low voter enrolment of First Nations people, is there a greater communication between the AEC and yourselves to ensure that that number does increase?
Yes, well, certainly that's the reason we have this ongoing contact and relationship. You know, we're aware that the numbers are significantly lower than the general population, though might add they are increasing at a higher rate than the general population as well. So the numbers are coming up, and AEC are doing a lot of work to continue that increase happening. So yes, but certainly the difference that exists and that lower number is why we have that relationship.
All right, thank you. I'll just go to my final topic, Chair. Thank you. If I can just ask for officers in relation to the McDonald versus Commonwealth class action.
I think we're ready to go, Senator McCarthy. Thank you.
Great. Are you able to just give an update on where proceedings are at with this particular case?
Senator Brendan Jacob, Chief Lawyer. The class action at the moment is proceeding through a number of court-ordered discovery orders. So that's at the process at the moment of discovering documents held by the Commonwealth that relate to the proceedings. You may be aware that the claims cover the period from 1 June 1933 to 12 November 1971, and potentially a large number of documents.
How many, sorry, just to go back, so how many are we talking about as part of this class action?
Sorry, Senator, I didn't quite catch that question. That was the number of...
Well, I'm just trying to understand. So the government will provide funding in 2022 to 23 to undertake court-ordered discovery process. Once the discovery process is completed, what would be the possibility of a settlement in this case?
Senator, the matter's currently being litigated, but I just make the general observation that in litigation such as this, you would, once you've completed discovery, you would, consider what your legal position is and liability, and part of that process may very well be consideration of whether there's scope to negotiate a settlement.
Okay, all right. Look, I will keep in touch with you on it. Clearly, it's an important matter, and obviously still in its early stages. So thank you for taking the time to answer just a couple of those questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator McCarthy. Now I think, Mr.
Chair.
Burden, did you want to say
Thank
something?
Thank you, Chair. Senator McCarthy, if I might just clarify the answer that my colleague, Mr. Ryan, gave to your question about the NIAA support to the Australian Electoral Commission. We have a secondment, and that secondment is a Canberra-based secondment, and we are also making available office space across our presence across the country for the use of AEC staff should they need it, and also doing some work with them on social media as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator McCarthy. If no other senators have questions for the NIAA, we will thank them very much for coming along this morning and dismiss them. And in light of the fact that we're changing officials, I might just briefly suspend the committee to allow the cross-portfolio departments to come into the room. Convene. And I welcome Ms Tanya Rishnu, Deputy Secretary, Primary and Community Care Group at the Department of Health, and other officers to join the officers of the NIAA for this session on Indigenous health issues. Ms Rishnu, I understand you do not have an opening statement.
No, that's right, Chair, but as always, can I acknowledge we meet today on Aboriginal land and pay my respects to Elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you very much. Senator O'Sullivan for a very short tranche of questions.
It is short, and I do thank you for your time. And I hope that you're able to give me some clarity on this situation. So on the 25th of March, the Health Minister released that we will not be extending the biosecurity emergency determination, which lapses on the 17th of April. And it goes on in the release, it says that there are a number of measures that the Biosecurity Act was used for under Commonwealth law, and one of them, of course, was mitigating the spread of COVID-19 in remote Indigenous communities and vulnerable neighbouring countries throughout the pandemic. And so with that lifted, what does that mean for access to communities around Australia? And in particular, in Western Australia, I have a particular issue that I will raise quickly with you, but I'll just start with that. What impact will that have on the limiting of people going into remote areas?
Hi, Senator. Dr. Lucas Atoka from the National COVID Vaccine Task Force and the Department of Health. The Biosecurity Act, or the framework from the emergency declaration under the Biosecurity Act, allowed for the Minister, on the recommendation of the Chief Medical Officer, to make instruments or determinations to place restrictions on remote communities on entry and exit. And that's been used throughout the pandemic, extensively through 2020, and recently in late 2021 and early 2022 in the Northern Territory to complement the powers of the Chief Health Officer of the Northern Territory on Aboriginal land. The remote restrictions or the determinations that limited access in and out of remote communities in the Northern Territory have been activated and deactivated at different times based on the request from the Northern Territory Government and the support from the land councils and the Aboriginal Community Control Health Services, and there hasn't been one in place since 31 January. The last one that covered Galuinku, Marchamba, the Western Islands and other areas in the Northern Territory expired on 31 Jan, and we have not used one of those determinations since. The determinations that you may be referring to in WA were done under powers of the Chief Health Officer under WA public health legislation, so they're not affected or impacted in any way by the end of the emergency declaration period.
Okay, so just confirming that in Western Australia, any of those orders are done under Western Australian state government health orders, not or biosecurity orders, not under any Commonwealth.
That is correct. There hasn't been Commonwealth biosecurity determination in WA areas since 2020.
Okay, great. Thank you. That confirms exactly what I thought was the case, and there's just some confusion. People are I'm seeing someone blaming the Commonwealth for this order, but it's not the case. So thank you very much. That's all, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator O'Sullivan. Do any other senators have questions for the Department of Health? There being no further questions, thank you very much to the officials for attending today. We will dismiss you, and that concludes the committee's cross-portfolio hearing on Indigenous matters. I'd like to thank the Minister and officers who have given evidence to the committee today, and thank the Secretary at Hansard and Broadcasting for their assistance. I now declare this meeting of the Senate Finance and Public Administration Legislation Committee adjourned.